The 2006 NCAA Highlight Show, Week 2, with your host, I am Sporticus. All right, so Week 2 is in the books of the 2006 Michigan Replay. The NCAA schedule for Week 2 has been played. Let's take a look at some scores. We'll kind of just go over them quickly and then maybe stop and look at some stats of some big games. Oregon State went to 2-0 with a 45-27 victory over Boise State. Matt Moore had 232 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. He also scored 2 scores on the ground, so 5 total touchdowns for Matt Moore. Navy beats UMass 21-7. Nebraska moves to 2-0 as they beat Nicholls State 31-10. Pittsburgh loses to Cincinnati. Nick Davila throws for 212 and 2 touchdowns for Cincy. Vanderbilt evens their score, knocking off Alabama, who falls to 0-2 on the season. Chris Nixon threw for 455 yards and 4 touchdowns. Arizona State goes to 2-0 as Rudy Carpenter throws for 359 yards, scored 1 touchdown on the ground, and threw for another. 41-24 is the final over Nevada. Arkansas beat Utah State. Darren McFadden ran for 213 yards and 3 touchdowns as they win 35-14. Arkansas State falls big to Oklahoma State, 59-21. Grant Jones had 2 touchdowns on returns for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Army falls to Kent State 34-6. Julian Edelman threw for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also rushed for 81 yards and another score. Indiana, a crushing loss to Ball State. Nate Davis threw for 225 yards and 3 touchdowns for the Ball State ball club. Ball State. Why am I blanking on the Ball State Cardinals? God, I couldn't think of their names. Baylor evens their record at 1-1, a 56-14 victory over Northwestern State. Sean Bell threw for 384 yards and 6 touchdowns. Boston College nips Clemson as both teams fall to 1-1. And Matt Ryan threw for 241 yards and 3 touchdowns. The winning score, with 42 seconds left in the fourth quarter, they would score 24 points in the fourth to win it. Big comeback for them. Let's take a deeper look at that game. So you see here, Clemson was up 24-7 headed to the fourth quarter, and Boston College would score 24 points in that quarter to win it. Davis rushed for 122 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember what his first name was. Let's look at the totals here. Excuse me. Clemson had the edge except for total yards, 360 yards. They had the edge rushing, whereas Boston College, Matt Ryan, had the edge of passing. Penalties, Boston College had 10 penalties. Turnovers, though, that's what killed Clemson. 4 turnovers for the Tigers. And that's it. They fall. 31-27. Buffalo nips Bowling Green. Look at this. 28 points in the fourth quarter to win it. Let's take a look at this real quick. It's not a... Sorry about that. It's not a big game, but I want to see what the score was. 34-7. Headed into the fourth quarter. Bowling Green had it in the bag, but here comes Buffalo in the fourth quarter. 4 straight touchdowns, including interception return for a score in the final 2:24 of the game to win it. Unbelievable. Bowling Green had 200-yard rushers. Barnes had 127 on 32 carries, and Bullock had 103 on 12 carries. I'm guessing the turnover battle it wasn't that bad. 2 turnovers they only had. But that was a pretty good comeback by the Buffalo Braves. I think it's a Braves. No, the Bulls. God, what do I think the Braves? Brigham Young beats Tulsa 40-7. John Beck threw for 348 yards and 2 scores. Cal upends Minnesota 44-28. Nate Longshore threw for 387 yards and 4 touchdowns. Colorado beats their rival Colorado State 41-14. Bernard Jackson threw for 151 and then rushed for 135 and 3 scores for the Buffaloes. They moved to 2-0 on the season. Florida wallops Central Florida 61-10. Chris Leak 365 yards and 6 touchdowns. He added 60 yards on the ground. Florida State blanks Troy 30-0. Xavier Lee passes for 339 yards and 2 touchdowns. He rushed for 32 more yards and a touchdown as well. Oregon beats Fresno State 30-20. Dennis Dixon threw for 260 yards, 2 touchdowns, rushed for 91 yards, and another score. Georgia Tech 79-0 over Samford. Reggie Ball 258 yards, 3 touchdowns. He also scored 1 on the ground, and he actually had a catch in this game. Where are we at here? Tulane loses to Houston 44-33 in a high-scoring affair. Kevin Kolb, I can't remember how to pronounce his name. I remember him, Kolb or Kolb? Kevin Kolb? He threw for 440 yards and 4 touchdowns to lead Houston. Iowa State beats UNLV 38-28. Brett Meyer threw for 285 yards and 2 scores, rushed for 72 more yards. Kansas all over Louisiana Monroe 58-31. John Cornish rushed for 199 yards and 3 touchdowns. Kansas State had trouble with Florida Atlantic, but they pulled it out to move to 2-0 on the season, 21-13. Leon Patton rushed for 110 yards. Kentucky beats Texas State 55-6. Andre Woodson throws for 242 yards and 4 scores. LSU knocks off Arizona 21-11. Not a barn burner by any means. Craig Davis had 5 catches for 93 yards. He also returned a score for a touchdown. I'm not sure if it was a punt or a kickoff. Let's take a look at it. Whoop. Yeah, 88-yard punt return. That put up LSU up on top to start off the game. They would go up 14-0 before Arizona would add a field goal. Doucette would score on a 1-yard pass from Jamarcus Russell to go up 21-3. And a late touchdown it wasn't too late, it was in the third quarter. Fourth quarter was scoreless. So Jamarcus Russell did not look super sharp. He had 2 picks as they struggle with Arizona, but they end up winning, so that's all that matters. Hofstra falls to Marshall 62-16. Ahmad Bradshaw rushes for 202 yards and 4 scores. Maryland goes to 2-0 with a 30-14 victory over Middle Tennessee State. Sam Hollenbach throws for 342 yards and 2 scores. Memphis beats Chattanooga 56-21. Joseph Doss rushes for 217 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also had 6 catches and 35s and 2 more touchdowns, so 6 total touchdowns for Doss. Miami, Florida blanks Florida A&M 40-0. Javaris James rushed for 224 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also added 7 catches for 87 yards. We see the score of the Michigan game. Michael Hart was the big star of that game, 163 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. Michigan State upends Eastern Michigan 27-7. Drew Stanton throws for 131 yards and 2 scores, and he rushed for over 100 yards as well. They moved to 2-0. Auburn beats Mississippi State 19-7. Auburn moves to 2-0. Brandon Cox throws for 256 yards and a score. Mississippi beats Missouri by a field goal 23-20. Chase Daniel throws for 263 yards in the loss. Yeah, he played for Missouri, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. They would score on a 15-yard touchdown pass in the fourth quarter to go up 23-20, and they would hold on to win it. New Mexico beats New Mexico State 41-21. Chris Nelson threw for 319 yards and 3 touchdowns. Virginia Tech beats North Carolina 55-16. Sean Glennon threw for 310 and 4 touchdowns. Akron upsets North Carolina State. Dennis Kennedy rushed for 147 yards and 3 touchdowns. Southern Methodist beats North Texas 27-14. Justin Willis threw for 121 yards and a score and rushed for 109 and another score. Northern Illinois beats Ohio 29-3. Big game from Tim McCarthy. 15 tackles, a stuff, an INT, and a pass defended. Northwestern upends New Hampshire. C.J. Backer throws for 245 yards, or C.J. Bechet, is it? I can't. This wasn't that long ago, and I can't remember how to pronounce some of these guys' names. I remember him, but I don't remember if it was C.J. I think it was C.J. Bechet. Whatever. 245 yards, 2 touchdowns. They win at 38-14. Penn State loses to Notre Dame. Brady Quinn threw for 338 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's going to set up a big game against the Wolverines next week. Notre Dame, Michigan, in which should be a battle. Oklahoma whoops Washington. Adrian Peterson, 232 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. Miami of Ohio loses big against Purdue. Curtis Painter, 380 yards and 6 touchdowns. They also rushed for another score. 7 scores total. Illinois in a battle against Rutgers. And by battle, I mean sarcastically. Rutgers wins the field goal war 9-6. Including the game winner as time expired. Rutgers wins it. Not a good outing for either team, really. Yeah, it wasn't a pretty game there. But Rutgers wins it. Stanford blanked by San Jose State in an embarrassing loss. Freddie McCutcheon had a couple sacks for the, I'm guessing the San Jose. couple sacks for him. In total, they had 6 sacks of the Stanford quarterback, McNally. San Jose State wins it. South Carolina beats Georgia 49-17. And what to me was, I can't remember how good since Georgia was then. They were 9-4 that year. But they lose this one to South Carolina 49-17. Blake Mitchell threw for 134 yards and 4 touchdowns. South Florida blanks Florida International 30-0. Matt Groth throws for 154 yards and a score, rush for 140 yards more. Southern Miss 56-0 over Southeastern Louisiana. Damian Fletcher rushed for 274 yards and 5 touchdowns. Iowa 42-22 over Syracuse. Albert Young rushed for 117 yards and a score. TCU beats UC Davis 17-10. Louisville all over Temple. Brian Brom threw for 343 yards and a score. 45-0 was the final. Tennessee 27-7 over Air Force. Eric Ainge threw for 246 yards and 3 scores. And our biggest upset of the day, Ohio State falls to Texas 31-14. Ohio State jumped out on top on a 22-yard touchdown pass from Troy Smith to Ted Ginn Jr., but Texas would tie it after a 12-yard fumble return by Loki to tie it up. Texas would go on top on a field goal, and they would take that lead 10-7 into the half. In the third quarter, Swede catches the touchdown pass from Colt McCoy, and they go up 17-7. Colt McCoy would add a 10-yard touchdown to make it 24-7, in what was a shocking lead at that time. And they would add to it, going up 31-7 on another run by Colt McCoy, this one from 11 yards out. And they would lead it 31-7 before Troy Smith found Ted Ginn Jr. with 2 minutes and 50 seconds left in the fourth, but it was all too late. McCoy threw for 189 yards of the score, and he also ran for 33 and 2 scores. Troy Smith, 264 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not a bad day, but he wasn't as accurate as he normally is. The rushing game was the disappointing part for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Pittman was held to just 27 yards on 11 carries. Look at that. Both total net yards the same. Penalties 5-2 in favor of Ohio State. Ohio State 5 sacks by Texas, I believe that would be. Yep. 2 from Arakpo. They pressured Troy Smith all day. They get the win. So I like the looks of that. Puts Michigan in the driver's seat. Texas A&M 41-14 over Louisiana Lafayette. Kerry Francis had a couple big returns, including a touchdown return from 97 yards, a kickoff return. East Carolina beats UAB 35-31. James Pinkney passes for 293 yards and 3 touchdowns. Rushed for another touchdown, including the game winner with 3:18 left in the fourth. UCLA beats Rice. Ben Olsen threw for 289 yards on a score. Texas Tech beats UTEP 28-21. Northern Arizona dropped by Utah 34-27. Brett Ratliff threw for 173 yards and 3 scores. He also rushed for 71 yards. Wyoming upends Virginia. A big win for them. Devin Moore rushed for 35 yards and a score. and including the game winner in overtime to win it for the Cowboys. Duke drilled by Wake Forest. Riley Skinner passed for 188 yards and 2 scores. Idaho demolished by Washington State. Alex Brink threw for 351 and 3 scores. Eastern Washington falls to West Virginia 59-6. Steve Slayton 218 yards and 4 touchdowns to lead the West Virginia team. Why am I drawing a blank on West Virginia? I should know West Virginia. Mountaineers, God. Especially 2 years later, their coach, Rich Rod, would join the Wolverines in what was arguably the start of the darkest period in Michigan football history. I remember when it happened, and I remember I had a lot of people that were happy about it, but I just kept saying, Rich Rod runs this offense. We're never going to get the. I used to love having the big tight ends and the pro style offense, and then we were going to go to this wonky spread offense, and I didn't like the sound of it. It was fun to watch at times, but man, just the defenses went to heck. And it was not fun. Not a fun time to be a Wolverine fan. Toledo beats Western Michigan 38-31. Aaron Opel throws for 206 yards and a score. And Wisconsin, big over Western Illinois, 51-14. They moved to 2-0. John Stocco passed for 281 yards and 3 touchdowns. Let's take a look at some highlights here. I'm sorry, we went wrong. The highlights here. We want to look at the summary. There we go. Now again, these top 40 rankings are goofy to me. USC, they're 1-0, and they are number 1 in the country. Texas, number 2 at 2-0. Oregon State, number 3. Tennessee, Iowa, Georgia Tech. Michigan's number 10 now. Hawaii, how could Hawaii get to number 15? I have no idea. So 300 passers. Chris Nixon had the highest total of the week, 455 yards for Vanderbilt against the Alabama Crimson Tide. He was throwing the ball all over the yard. He led to the win. Houston's Kevin Kolb had 440 yards. So, some big games. 100-yard rushers. Damian Fletcher had the highest total of the week, 274 yards rushing. Against Southeastern Louisiana, 5 touchdowns. He was pretty much unstoppable. Adrian Peterson had 232. Tashard Choice for Georgia Tech had 227. A lot of 200-yard rushers this week. Interceptions, Mike Mickens for Cincinnati had a couple picks. Virginia Tech's Xavier Adiba had 2. Hansbrough had 2 for Northern Illinois. Stoney Woodson was South Carolina. Jordan Peterson and Mark Dodge both had a couple picks for Texas A&M and their win over Louisiana Lafayette. Three sacks for Philip Hunt for Houston, Jeremy Jarman for Kentucky, and Michael Hurd, I think it's Mississippi State, yeah. Mississippi State had 3 sacks. Field goals. Cal's Tom Schneider had 5, Chris Henendick had 5, and Patrick Shadle had 5. Receivers. Craig Davis for LSU. Why am I drawing a blank on what PR is? He had 93 yards receiving. Punt returns, I'm sorry. 100 yards in punt returns. Okay. So here's the leaders after week 2. Passing leaders, Chase Holbrook leads everybody with 815 yards in 2 games. UTEP's Jordan Palmer is 815 and Brian Brom 797. Rushing leader Steve Slayton has 417 yards rushing in 2 games. P.J. Hill for Wisconsin has 380. And Jensen Bernard has 364. Receiving leaders, Eastern Michigan's Eric Deslaurs has 20 catches. Dorian Bryant for Purdue has 20 catches. And Shannon Woods for Texas Tech has 19. Interception leaders, Stoney Woodson for South Carolina, Quentin Demps for UTEP, and Arkansas's Keon Burns each have 3. Sack leaders, Brian Madison and Mitch King for Iowa each have 5. Mississippi State's Michael Hurd has 4. So there you have it. That's week 2. Best offenses in the league. Let's take a look at the top 10. Louisville leads all teams in the NCAA with 658 yards a game. Yikes. They must have played a couple patsies. Let's take a look at their schedule. No, they played Kentucky, and then they played Temple, so they went 12-1 that year. So their offense, whoops, shoot. Connecticut and Purdue's up there. West Virginia's number 4. Florida, Tulane, Houston, Arizona State, Missouri, and Georgia Tech. Points per game, Connecticut is averaging 70 points a game. They must have only played 1 game because I think they... Let's take a look at their schedule. Yeah, they've only played 1 game. They won 70 to... Purdue, 65.5 points per game. Let's take a look at their schedule. They beat Indiana State 76-14 in week 1 and 55-10 over Miami, Ohio in game 2. Ball State should give them a little more of a challenge. Ball State beat Indiana in week 2, so... And then they start the Big Ten schedule. Of course, they got Notre Dame in there too, but... let's see what else we want to look at here. Really nothing else right now. How about defenses though? Best defenses. Auburn leads the way, 124 yards per game. Tough defense for them. Points per game, Georgia Tech has allowed 3.5. It's really hard to tell early in the season because everybody's playing cupcakes, but pretty... yeah, Iowa has 17 sack... they've been sacked 17 times already? They were 6-7. They've won their first 2 games, but let's see, that could be a problem. 3-5. No, I think that's... They've got 17 sacks to start the season. Pretty impressive in 2 games. All right, we'll stop right there. So there you have it. Week 2's in the books. Next week, let's take a look at the schedule. See if there's any really big games here. A couple 2-0 teams here. West Virginia taking on Maryland. Alabama should be able to get their first win of the season against Louisiana Monroe. What was Alabama that year? 6-7. Trying to remember what year. What year did Saban come to town? Was that 2007 or 2008? I can't remember. LSU Auburn, that should be a really good game. LSU's 2-0, but they've had a pretty. They beat Louisiana Lafayette pretty good, but they struggled with Arizona. So that'll be a big game from them. Okay, let's see here. Other than that, Clemson against Florida State, 2 1-1 teams. Mississippi and Kentucky. 2-0 Iowa State against 2-0 Iowa. Miami, Florida will take on the high-flying Louisville Cardinals. That should be a good one. Oklahoma against Oregon. 2-0 Oklahoma against the Oregon Ducks. Cincinnati takes on Ohio State. Ohio State needs the win there. Notre Dame and Michigan, that's the big game of the week. Michigan State will take on Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh. That should be a good game. Ball State and Purdue. Purdue tries to move to 3-0. Florida and Tennessee, a big SEC matchup there. 2-0 teams squaring off. Nebraska, USC. That should be a good one. That's about it. San Diego State and Wisconsin. But that'll be it. So we'll see you for week 3. Thanks for watching.